Hello and welcome to the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan, and on this show, my guests and I unpack the stories that shape us and the lives we lead on our path to self-mastery. Today on the show, we have Steve Miller. Steve is the founder of the Manly Club and the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood. So we're going to talk about some manly things on this episode, but ladies, don't turn this off just yet. We're going to talk about some topics that both men and women work through. So we're going to hear from Steve about his background and what he believes makes up a powerhouse man. And he shares what has led to creating the Brotherhood and what he's learned leading a group of over 13,000 men for 5 years, and now building something even greater. So let's not wait any longer. Let the games begin. Hello, Steve. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you, Nick?
I am great. And I'm so excited that you're on this show today. It's been a long time coming. I've been a part of the Facebook group that you have, and I'm going to be a little ambiguous right now, but been part of that Facebook group for a handful of years. And I know that we're building something big in the group outside of that as well. But dude, I'm so glad that you're here, man. Why don't you kick us off, Steve, and tell us what you do for a living and one thing that most people don't know about you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited about being here. I don't really do the traditional work anymore. I used to be a Silicon Valley guy, and now I've kind of floated away from all that. I think that if you talk to a lot of former Silicon Valley guys, they'll say, I took the money and I ran, and they just, and it's really a kind of it seems almost like a temporary lifestyle for a lot of people, right? It's like, well, I'm going to do this for now. I'm going to do all the grinding and all the hustling, and I'm going to do the 16-hour work days for now. And you kind of know in the back of your mind, it's, at some point you're going to, you're going to ride off into the sunset, right? And you're going to leave, and you're going to find a nice, quiet place to live out the rest of your years. And that's kind of what I did. I still do some of the stuff. I still, collaborate on a lot of projects. But I've been very fortunate to not have to any longer worry about, the job. And it's a good feeling. We're up here in Oregon now. We moved up about 8 or 9 years ago, and just enjoying life up here. And I do, like I said, I do some sales and marketing stuff. A lot of what happens to people who leave that lifestyle from Silicon Valley is they keep a lot of their connections, and then these temporary assignments just kind of come their way, and they help out a lot of friends. They'll do some short-term projects with people, and it's really cool. You can kind of have some of that still, some of that excitement still, mm-hmm. And then at the same time you can stay away from that whole scene, which is it's great for some people, but then really, like I said, it's kind of a short-term thing. There's some people who can withstand it for 10, 15, 20 years, and other people, like me, it's just like, wow, the whole time practically I was saying, oh man, got to get away from this. So something that people don't know about me, I think that people think that I'm a coach, and I'm not. I'm not a coach. I have people, through, we mentioned the Manly Club. I've been running the Manly Club now for over 5 years. We just had our 5-year anniversary. And over the years, just being engaged online and talking to men, it's just assumed that, you're a coach. So I still to this day get messages, DMs from people saying, hey, can I hire you? It's like, no, you can't hire me. There's nothing to hire. And then really what I do is I kind of steer people towards the coaches that I do know, and I work with a lot of coaches, and so I think it's a common thing, but that people misunderstand. But I guess that's it. I guess that's my answer is, I'm not a coach. Nothing against coaching. I think I probably would love it if I ever got into it. I think that it's a great thing that people do. Is they get they get involved at that level, and there's a lot of coaching that's happening that is just life changing stuff. So I respect it and I work with these guys, but I just don't do it.
It makes sense why people would ask you, are you a coach? Because the Manly Club on Facebook is, God, what, close to 14,000 men at this point? So to think of the owner of that group, well, he must do something that has to do with coaching or something of the sort. It's funny, I never really thought about that, and I'm a coach. But I'm sure there are people that just hop in, they have no idea who you are. Or they see you and go, oh my gosh, I wonder if he can help because he set this thing up. And dude, I got to be honest. The group that you set up is a massive group. And there's a lot of engagement. But I know one of the big things that we're going to get into, and you know what? 5 minutes into the show, we may as well just get into the damn thing now. So, Steve, tell us about the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood that spun off of the Manly Club, and give us a little background of that. Like, where did the idea come from?
The name of the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood came from my past. I've been around a lot of men. I'm from back east. I'm from born and raised in Brooklyn, and a lot of the men around me. My dad had 7 brothers. My mom had brothers. A lot of the people around me were these larger than life figures. These men who just came into a room and they just had presence. And I always considered them to be powerhouse men. They had it all together. They were dialed in with their family. They were dialed in with their careers. They were dialed in every aspect of the word. They were just squared away men. And I always viewed them as these powerful men. And I think a lot of people question the name Powerhouse Man because it sounds like we're promoting some type of power over other people. And the reality is that powerhouse men hold power over themselves. That's their objective, right? They want to be in total control over their own personal life. And so that's where the name came from. The idea came from the fact that in the Manly Club, it's really kind of superficial stuff. We do cover a lot of important things, but it's more kind of like a place for men to hang out and talk about man stuff, the Manly Club. Topics come up. Some of them are really important. Some of them are dangerous. We get guys who are struggling with suicide, and and then we try to steer those men to the right resources, of course. But the Manly Club is very difficult. Being on Facebook, it's very difficult to engage at the level that I wanted to engage with men. And I could see over 5 years, that there was a missing element to this, right? There was something that the Manly Club was not providing. And I could see the conversations, men would come in and they would start talking about some serious stuff, some heavy duty life stuff. And I just didn't feel like the interface was capable of sustaining good conversations. First of all, Facebook throttles a lot of stuff, right? They don't really allow the reach. So you're not really getting a lot of men seeing the most important posts. And then the conversations, it's just kind of like this long stream, right? And it's kind of a lot of reading, it's kind of, men don't really want to read through all of the stuff. And then you get a lot of redundant posts, right? And so the interface itself was kind of a hindrance. So I knew that we needed to do something else to create a different environment. So we spun off the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood from that based on need. And then we had, at the beginning, we had a lot of focus on the things that we thought the brotherhood should be. And then we started listening to men and understanding that the brotherhood really needs to be a place that isn't so much built on what we think it should be. It should be built on what they think it should be. And so we started listening to more and more men, and they were saying, hey, I really want this, this, and this. And we just started plugging away and putting pieces of it together. And now we have something that is building into a pretty dynamic place for men to go and to find some really good solutions. I think, some men all they really want is friendship. They want camaraderie. Yeah. Other men are going through trauma. They want help with something, and they want. And some men are looking for purpose and meaning in their life, which is, I think, a big part of the brotherhood. Where purpose and meaning. I think we all kind of struggle with that at some point. We all kind of hit that patch in our life where we're like, hey, I'm doing all the things. I got the schooling done. I got the job. I got the family. I got the investment account. Got the cars. Got the vacations. Why do I feel empty? And that's a very real question that men ask themselves. But then, what do you do? Once you hit that point, what do you do? Where do you go? You can talk to your friends, but your friends who you have around you. Some people are fortunate to have a lot of friends around them, and this can be a really good resource. And then other men are just completely disconnected. Right? They're loners, maybe intentionally, or maybe it's because of where they live. But it's very difficult to find men to talk to and be a little vulnerable and talk about these things. It's like, hey, I feel kind of lost. I don't really know where I am in life. It's like I've done so much, and I thought it would feel different. Yeah. And so we're trying to create that kind of environment. So basically what that is, so you have the spectrum, right? You have somebody coming in with the most basic of needs, right? Which is, hey, I just want to find some men to hang out and talk to. And then all the way across the whole spectrum to men who need a lot of help. We're bringing on some men with, some of these experts, if you will, that we're creating teams with. These leaders are experts in what they do, and so we're trying to cover a lot of ground, but at the same time, we also want a place where men feel very, very comfortable.
It's a sad thing almost to think about how many men are out there, and I'm sure there are women too, but I think of the men that are out there that are just hurting and don't know what to say or how to say or what to do about it. And then if they turn to somebody, it's almost like they get bitched out by a friend because they're like, hey man, I don't feel good about this thing, or this is not right, or whatever. And that friend's like, well, just put some dirt on it. That doesn't really make any sense there, buddy. But think about how many shitty people, and I say shitty people in the sense that they're just hurting as well, and they just spew back some sort of negativity. Typically that's from a fear state where they're like, I don't want to hear it because I got my own shit that I don't really even want to think about. Can we just sit here and continue to drink at this bar? And nothing against bars or nothing, but at the same time, if that's where they're just focusing and just going through that, I think that's a huge talking point that we could get into, is just the idea of men being able to actually open up and have other men that can respect the fact that they opened up and they talked about things. And then there's the power of technology. I mean, we're doing this podcast and I'm in Florida, you're in Oregon. The technology allows us to talk from wherever we are. And I know that we have a handful of people, at least that I'm aware of, that are already part of the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood that are in semi-remote parts of the country where they're probably in that spot where they're like, well, I don't want to join a kickball league down at the YMCA. And I don't want to drive 10 miles to go sit at a pub to hopefully maybe make a friend, because that's a lot of effort, a lot of work, and a lot of excuses.
One of the other bigger hindrances in this is that we have men who are holding back, even if they have access to resources like other men around them. They're too embarrassed, or they're too you don't want to, somebody who you are engaging with all the time, and you have kind of like this peer group set up. You don't want to reveal something, and then face that man in the future because you feel squirmish about your vulnerability. And that's a very real concern. I mean, you can criticize it and say, well, just, suck it up, buttercup. And you could tell those men, well, to do it anyway, or you can convince them that, well, if you open up and you show vulnerability, they will too. All that really doesn't translate into real life stuff, right? So if you have a place that you can go to, and these men, and I think that's one of the benefits of having an online community just in general, is that you're engaging with them, you're friends with them, and you're getting the camaraderie, but you also have that space, and I think that that's part of what men need. I know that early on, that was one of the surprising parts of the Manly Club when I first started it, was that I liked that part of it. I liked that aspect of it. And, vulnerability is one of those things that, you could talk all day about it, but a lot of men have different opinions about it, right? Vulnerability shows weakness, right? And, okay, so what? Are you gonna pretend that you don't have moments of real weakness? It's like, hey, we all do, right? We all have those moments. But as soon as we see other men, right? You see other men who are maybe men who you look up to and you respect and admire, right? High character men, right? You look at them and it's like, hey, they're being vulnerable. Right? They're talking about some of this difficult stuff that I'm going through, and they're doing it, and I still respect them. And, maybe that's, something that I can do. I can be a little bit vulnerable, and I can put myself out there more. And that's why we encourage that. And that really starts out slow. You see men who kind of come in and they kind of lurk, they kind of hang out, and and then they slowly kind of work their way into conversations. And then again, really, if you have a core group of men, like our leaders, you, Ariel, Oleg, all these the leaders of the Powerhouse Men, if you have, these men on there talking this way and, expressing themselves this way, it really kind of eases their mind. And the one thing about vulnerability that I think is that a lot of men misunderstand the worth, the value in it. It's like, well, that's not really gonna help me too much. And I think a lot of that is, this kind of masculine mask that men, feel like they need to wear, right? And when you're wearing that mask and you're, putting up this persona, it's kind of misleading, right? You get a weird perspective, right? And you kind of misunderstand what's really going on when it comes to masculinity and vulnerability. You kind of, I think that you get lost in that. And then once that's stripped away, once you realize that you no longer need to wear that mask. You no longer need to hide behind anything. Once you get into that zone and then you start feeling comfortable, then you start realizing that there's a lot of value here. And getting men to that point, though, is very difficult. Very hard to, get them to that point. So we're working on that. We're working on ways to get men comfortable and get them talking, and then realize that the solutions are out there.
Yeah. Sometimes just the act of talking about something, I've realized, helps me in so many different ways. And I'm sure other men are the same. Clients of mine, friends of mine, family, hell, the conversations you and I have kind of off air in a sense. When you are able to talk about stuff and just start to get the things out, and you feel confident enough to just feel in a safe space, sometimes you'll even answer your own damn questions. Where you're like, what should I do with this thing? What about blah, blah, blah? And you kind of start talking through it. But I've realized, being part of the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood, those daily check-ins that we have, people either do them in the morning or they'll do them at night, like the last thing before, like, hey, today was this or whatever. It's interesting to see how certain men, like when they first start, they're kind of hesitant with what to put. Like, well, I'm excited for today. And then a couple days in, they're like, woke up and I was in a real shitty mood. And here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. But here's what I'm thinking. And I love that piece of it, because the men that we're actually attracting that are part of the group are the men that are like, look, I got to be honest. I woke up and fucking hated waking up. But at the same time, after that, I thought, well, I don't normally hate it. So what can I do to better myself? And having even some of those check-ins that you can see. Hell, I think you had mentioned something earlier on one of those check-ins. Like, today was a little rough, and then I saw this, and it just kind of lifted me up.
Yeah, yeah. And having those conversations, they just get better over time. I think that's the misleading part about being vulnerable. It's like you think that there's some negative part of this, and then you realize pretty fast that there isn't. Right. And then you really realize that there's a lot of growth potential here. We look at other men in a different way. Once you realize that and this is the weird part. It's like, well, wait a minute. That's actually a sign of masculinity. It's like, and then the respect level goes up. It's like, wow, I thought, and I thought this myself personally, that if I were to be too vulnerable, and if I were to be, and if I wasn't always wearing that mask of masculinity, that people were going to think less of me, and they weren't going to know that I'm a high character man, and I'm manly just like them. I'm masculine, and I was afraid that I was going to be found out as some other thing, and that I was going to be misunderstood as some other thing. And I really didn't want that. So I was always hiding behind this, and it's really hard to figure that out on your own. That's why in one of our exercises that we do in the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood is, we do these exercises around like man in the mirror, right? And we try to ask very specific questions. And these questions are designed to get you thinking in a certain way, right? And everything is geared towards us trying to peel away those layers, right? It's like, we can dig down a little bit further every day. And then once you start getting used to having those man in the mirror conversations with yourself and being honest with yourself, it becomes easier and easier to open up and have the more powerful conversations. I think there's a lot of power in a man who can sit down and have an honest conversation with himself and admit the hard stuff to himself, and use that information that he's learning about himself to build a better life going forward. But until someone points that out, it's kind of hard to see, and
sure.
We have, these life vision exercises, right? Where we help men build a vision and then build a life philosophy, and then to also put some action towards those things with a journaling practice, right? So there's a systematic approach to what we're trying to do with men who want it. Within the Brotherhood, we don't force men to do this, but anybody who feels like they need to stop drifting, right? And it's really a mental drift. It's not a physical drift, right? Like I said earlier, a lot of men who are really squared away in a lot of aspects of their life, but then they're kind of mentally drifting, right? It's like, well, I don't really understand my purpose and my meaning. And then once they realize that if you put some structure to it, you put some protocols in place, you write down a vision for your life, you write down a philosophy, and then you follow that up with some journaling practices that work on those aspects of what you just built. I think that putting that on paper and putting that in motion in an actual system is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes I think a man could make is to dismiss that as something that they don't need. Because it's really hard. I mean, think about it. How many men are going to say to themselves, well, you know what I need to do is I need to, I'm really suffering right now and I'm kind of lost. And what I need to do is write down life vision. So you don't really, it's not really just going to show up, right? And it's hard to think of those solutions. But when you come into a brotherhood and other men are working on their own lives, and then it becomes very clear. It becomes very purposeful once you see other men doing it. And I think that's the power of a brotherhood.
Big time. You've said purpose a number of times, even growth. And obviously the point to this show about mindset and self-mastery, those things tie in directly to what we're doing within the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood because of that mindset. If somebody comes into any sort of situation, be it a brotherhood or a job or even just cleaning the damn dishes, if you go into it with a fixed negative mindset, then you're not going to get anything out of it, or at least anything worthwhile. But being able to go into something that you can have processes and protocols to be able to walk you through and guide you through that tough stuff, the logical things that are sometimes hard to peel away from the emotional side, and being able to have that growth mindset with other growth-oriented people. And I got to be honest, that's one of the things that attracted me to the group when you had first launched the beta. What was that, late last year, maybe Q4, Q3 of last year, saying, hey, we're going to launch this thing and we're looking for a handful of men that want to be a part of this to help us grow this thing. I noticed right off the bat that those people that were part of it, the handful of us that started it with you in that sense, they, for the most part, were growth oriented. The people that weren't, they're not part of it. So it's interesting to see those people that come into this knowing like, well, I've got to kind of work through that. And there are certain people that I think we're going to help them work through that within the brotherhood, where we'll watch them kind of bloom. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yes, I agree. And it can be difficult. It can be very difficult for men to see the vision, and to see the value of a brotherhood. And what I try to convince men to do is to just stick with it and give it a chance. Give it a real opportunity. Tune in, try to participate, ask questions, talk to other men, and then you'll see what this is all about. It is a powerful resource, and it's something, ironically, that is actually changing my life. And when I look back on how I lived my life, and I could have used this 25 years ago, right? It's like, man, how much different would my life have been had I found a brotherhood that was so so passionate about helping others. How much different would my life have been? So I think that's the misunderstanding, where it's like, well, if a man is currently going through something in their life, right, currently in some phase of their life where there's a struggle, right, there's some adversity right now, I think that the most common reaction or the most common response from a man is to man up, right? And to, just to, suck it up, buttercup, get through it. This is what men do, and they feel like if they go to a resource where they're asking for help, that's going to reveal some weakness, like we were talking about earlier. And I think that's a huge misconception. And I think that's something that is a mistake. I think that any man, I don't care where you are in life, it doesn't matter where you are in life. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what you've been through. If you reach out and you try to connect with others, you're going to learn something, and it's going to change you. And that's something that we want to get the message out to men. It's like, hey, give this an opportunity. Look at what it is. Look and try to understand that we're not judging you. We're not labeling you. This is not what a brotherhood does. People who judge and label are not in brotherhoods. They're out doing other stuff, right? They're not online trying to better themselves. They're not trying to improve themselves, right? They're not here. And if they do show up and somehow work their way in to a brotherhood, we're gonna get rid of them, right? And so give it an opportunity. Give it a chance. Talk. Open yourself up a little bit. Show a little vulnerability. Other men look at vulnerability different than what you think. Other men look at vulnerability as a sign of masculinity, not as a sign of weakness. That's the biggest message.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that's also changing over the course of time. It's kind of on us. You're a little older than I am. You have kids, so it'll be on your kids as well to be able to help continue that to grow and allow people to be open and talk through things. It's so interesting, that journey that people need to go through, just the personal development journey. I had a conversation with somebody maybe 2 weeks ago, an episode that's probably going to air before this. We were talking about how clumsy and awkward you are as you kind of go through your personal development. And for the most part, it's all by yourself. And as a man, you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm trying to do these different things. But if you've got a group of people you can connect with, a group of other men that are either on the same path as you are or round about that, or maybe even a little further, that can help and be a guide. I am right there with you, man. I could have used this years ago. And it's funny because I've seen this so many times. Be the man or be the person that you needed as a kid, or that you needed years ago. And now we're literally doing that, creating that space for men to be able to be open and vulnerable. But there's that process that they need to go through. And this is calling out all the men that are listening to the show and all the men that come into the group. There's a process you're going to go through that you have to actually go through. And some of that shit, when you want to just run off or not show up or not do this thing, that's a great sign to just do it. Just step in and do the damn thing. Because that little bit of fear is like, oh, you don't want to be a part of this thing. This isn't going to help you. When in all reality, all it's going to do is help. So it's interesting to see some of the men going through some of that now. And as the leadership, we can see different people, and it's on us to be able to kind of tap in and be able to love on those people and help them out. But those men, it's on them to actually walk through that and then raise their hand. And it's interesting to see how some of that's happening.
The resources are out there, but if you think about what resources you actually have, if you're a man and you're struggling with something and you're trying to figure something out, you're trying to better yourself in some way, the resources are so limited in that. Well, they're not limited. They're all over the place, right? There's YouTube videos, there's books, there's all kinds of resources. But at the end of the day, there's something has to happen. Right? So let's say you watch a bunch of videos, right? Every day for a week, you watch these videos because you're trying to fix something about yourself, right? The thing that you have identified as being the thing that you need to move yourself forward and maybe get yourself out of this funk that you're in, right? You feel stuck, right? So I'm going to watch videos every day for a week and then, or I'm going to read a bunch of books, right, on the subject, right? But then at the end of the day, there's something that has to happen, right? You have to convert that information and all that learning into actionable steps that you actually take in your life, and then you implement these changes. That's the disconnect, right? It's like you read a great book, you read a great book on something, but then you have to implement it. You have to actually use that data. You got to use that information. So now, what is that? Is that accountability? Yeah, that's accountability, right? And are you going to hold yourself accountable? Well, maybe not. We get these bursts of short-term enthusiasm, right? It's like we want to go out there and we want to learn we want to learn about a subject or something we have identified, and then we're really super excited about it, but then we slowly kind of wane. It's like we read the book and then we slowly kind of slip back into our old habits, right? We get very habitual in our thinking, we get very habitual in our behaviors, and then you're right back to square one. So short-term enthusiasm pushes you forward, right? It's like you push forward and then you slowly start sliding back. Well, in a brotherhood, what happens is you talk about reading a book, and then you talk about things that you're working on. You're talking about these changes that you're trying to make. And then your brothers of the brotherhood are right there holding you accountable for those changes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, last week we talked about this thing that you're working on. How's that going? What did you do? You know, now what new actions can we take to push this even more forward and continue this conversation and continue these changes, continue these new behaviors, these new habits, and then it becomes something special. Really, what happens is you start doing that for yourself. You know, you start reaping those benefits, and then you start doing that for others. You start holding them accountable, and that's where the magic for brotherhood just starts coming together. You start realizing and saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm growing myself and I'm growing others. I'm growing with these other men. That is the power of a brotherhood. You're growing yourself and you're growing at the same time other men, and you're all doing it together. You're all pushing forward. And those types of relationships, personally, I think those are the most powerful ones. You know, they're not superficial. Right? We have a lot of in-person superficial relationships, right? Where we talk to our buddies about fishing and hunting, and we talk about cars, and we talk about surface stuff, right? And those are important friendships to have. But when it comes to real actual change in our life and really pushing our life forward, the relationships and the work that you do inside of a brotherhood, I think is one of the most powerful things that we can do.
Time. The accountability of it all is a major factor of it. You know, I keep thinking about this man. There's nobody in particular, but a man that is kind of living their life. They're doing their things. They've checked off the boxes, like you've said. But they don't have anybody really near them that they can do this sort of thing with. So to be able to jump into something and have a Monday night call or a Thursday night call with your team and be able to work through stuff, this is even something that people can work through as they work through how they talk about the things with their family and with their friends. Because, look, we've all heard you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And I've had to tell clients and friends and family, that includes you. Like, you are that for somebody else. So it's interesting to see the men start to envelop some of this and then spew some of that back out. We're seeing some of that within the group now. And let's be real here. The group's only a handful of months old. So it's still growing. Men are still kind of opening up. But at this point, we've got a solid amount of men that are already part of the group. In fact, on that note, Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about what it looks like to check out the group and to be part of the group? And we're also running a promo right now, right?
We have a special going on, 50% off through the manlyclub.com website. We're inviting men in, and we are trying to build this right now in the early stages. We're trying to build out all of these features that we're hearing that men want. You know, one of the current things that we're working on right now is creating a buddy system to where the day-to-day accountability of, you know, because it's one thing to be on a team, and so there's two parts of this. One is you're on a team and you meet weekly with your team, and then every week the team holds you accountable, right? If you have a team of 15 guys, every week there's going to be 5 guys who are on the hot seat, right? They're the guys who show up, and they're the guys who have to talk about the stuff that they're working on right now. Next week is the next 5 guys, that kind of thing, right? So that's one thing, one method. But then we're all different, right? Some people need this daily support, this daily accountability. So we're creating these buddy system, right? To where you and another man are constantly, maybe it's over text message, maybe it's over email or whatever it is, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's a Zoom call or whatever it is, then you're holding each other accountable every single day. And so it's a constant accountability process, because that's what a lot of us need. Right. And it really depends. And that's really going to be different for a lot of men. Right. There's going to be it's going to be a different need for a lot of men. Some men are going to be annoyed by that. Right. And then some men are going to really value that. And so we're trying to build those features that are going to cover as many different types of men as humanly possible. And that's what we're doing right now. Our growth stage, our early growth stage, is based on just listening to what the men are telling us.
And they have been vocal. So thank you, men, for being vocal and talking up about things.
Yes.
I know I was one of those being vocal about stuff too. It's interesting to be able to build something and be able to help other people and then be able to implement something so quickly. And you touched on the startup life. It's way different than corporate world where you have to go through bureaucracy and meetings after meetings after meetings. I mean, there are certain times, look, we have to have meetings as leadership, but we'll knock things out at the end of that meeting and say, all right, this is the next thing that's going to happen. So it's cool to see how we're able to be a bit nimble and flexible as we kind of work through this. But Steve, I really appreciate you being on the show today. And like I ask every single person that's on the show, what's one piece of advice that you'd give somebody that's on their path towards self-mastery?
I would say get your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions in alignment. It's really as simple as that. And it's something that is, I think, misunderstood and undervalued. When you first hear people talking about things like this, the first reaction is, here we go with the cosmic ooze, right? And, but get past that. Get past that. Understand that you don't need to suffer, right? Once you understand that first of all, you're in total control, right? Once you understand that there is a systematic approach that you can take to put these things in place, I think it's an eye-opening experience. It really is, and really, in a nutshell, it really boils down to getting that alignment in place. And there are men out there who can help you do it without the judgment, without the labeling, but find those resources. And if it's not the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood, find another one, but do something about it and take action and follow through.
That's awesome, man. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. It's a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Steve, where can people find out more about the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood?
Manlyclub.com. TheManlyClub.com. Everything is there. All the resources, all the information. You can actually reach out directly to me through that website, and I answer all of my emails personally, and it's all there.
Perfect. So check out themanlyclub.com and you can get more information about Powerhouse Men Brotherhood. Again, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Nick.
Another great conversation on today's episode of the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. Now, I know a lot of men listen to this show, and ambitious men at that. So sometimes we, as ambitious men, just find it so much friggin' easier to just bottle shit up or maybe confide in a friend, but only so much to an extent about maybe a tough situation. But for the most part, you're gonna be like, nah, I'll be all right. So ask yourself, why is that? Why? And are you okay with that? That level of depth? Probably not, or you really wouldn't be listening to the show. And there's a daily battle to be fought and lessons to be learned if we're willing to listen, be coachable, and accept accountability. And we're building something incredible over at the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood that's going to help with that. So check it out. And like Steve said, we're currently running a 50% off promo. When you sign up, just tell them you heard about it from the show. And we may have a little something extra for you. So what did you think of today's episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we talked about. And if you enjoyed the episode, please jump over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us to be found and helps others to be healed. And if you really enjoyed the show, go ahead and share it with your friends, your family, coworkers, whoever comes to mind. And check out the show notes for more info, contact info for Steve, and check out other episodes on the Mindset and selfmasteryshow.com, as well as our YouTube channel, the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. Right there in search, hit the enter button or return or whatever on your computer and you'll find us. And I want to thank our sponsors, the Manly Club, and the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood. Do you consider yourself to be a powerhouse man? The criteria for becoming one is simple. Live with virtue and do good work. You see, a powerhouse man builds his life and he doesn't settle for it. He attacks mediocrity at the root, and that's exactly what we do in the Powerhouse Men Brotherhood. Visit themanlyclub.com for more details. And thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for being a supporter of this show. And thank you for doing what you can to continue to grow. So with that, remember, your mindset matters, and so do you.